Microsoft Outlook, and then when it says you're not on Google Chrome, and I go, okay, so
It's all good.
but I'm
We've got
here.
you now. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. I I had made the mistake of not writing it down as soon as I said yes, which I usually do, putting it on my calendar because I got home from church a short time ago and I was just finished eating lunch and when you said so yeah, but I'm doing fine. I've been preoccupied with all the controversy over the convention and Nate Bluen and Trevor Lee, and I've just been
Yeah.
and the book banning. I posted on Facebook, and hundreds of people are responding. And it's so discouraging. I mean, I just can't even believe this is the United States of America, and they're and Utah, and we're banning books like Toni Morrison's "The Bluest Eye" that was on my AP reading list years all through the 80s and 90s when I taught, and had many students write essays on it. And I just, it's to think when when only a few districts have to, approve the banning. It's not just a district. I said to people, this could be one or two people. It could be a Nicolene Peck, who's crazy woman in Tooele, because it's always Tooele. And then it's often Davis County, and there's a woman named Brooke Stevens who's just, she's not a legislator, but she's just as bad. She's worked with Ken Ivory, and she makes money off of it. She has this site called Rate My Books, and he always says, just look on Rate My Books and you'll see, well, she makes money. And it's so despicable. And I was hoping Ken Ivory would be out at convention, and I saw that he got 78%, and there was a good Republican running against him. And I don't know if she got signatures or not. I can't find the results of their convention anywhere.
Yeah,
I don't.
I'm not positive on it. The Bluest Eye, I'm not super familiar with that book.
Well,
What is it about, and do you know why it was banned?
yeah, I do. Uh, it's by Toni Morrison, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature. She also wrote other novels, but one of them called Beloved, that my daughter teaches AP and IB English at Skyline, has for years, has taught it for 25 years. And last year, right before she was going to start it, the last one novel she was going to teach before the AP exam, a Granite board member who homeschools her kids, she's young and she has young kids, and is part of that UPU group endorsed by them, she filed a complaint against Beloved. And I don't know if she'd read it. I doubt it. They just get these books lists from the Moms for Liberty. And Jill's principal came and told her the day she was going in to start teaching it. She told her students about it Monday. I'm getting to the Bluest Eye, but um, it's got some rough stuff. It's slavery. A woman, it's based on a true slave story, a woman that killed her baby and named her Beloved because the slave owner was coming to get her children. But you're not sure if she really killed her or not. It's magical realism, and it's. But she won the Pulitzer Prize. Plus, she won the Nobel Prize for her body of work. She won the Pulitzer Prize for that. Oprah Winfrey made it into a novel or a movie. And Jill had to go in and tell her AP class, and then another one. 62 kids didn't get to read it last year and study it. And it's listed on the College Board website as one of the novels or literary works, including others works by Shakespeare. The students that write on it get the highest scores, 4s and 5s. So back to the Bluest Eye.
So wait, so the students that are reading it, they do better on the AP like English test on
Students that
average.
write on it on the open question, because it's a difficult novel, but it has the F word in it and there are rapes, but there's nothing pornographic. The same thing with the Bluest Eye. It's about a young Black girl who is assaulted, and she wants to have blue eyes and white skin. And so it's about racism and the discrimination and the what that does to a young person, growing up in a society where Blacks were not, I don't know if it was before integration, going to school. So in committee, in the education committee almost 2 years ago, when the first sensitive materials bill came out, and Ken Ivory was there presenting, and I said, I mean, this was a rhetorical question because I knew the answer, and I said, "What's in the bluest?" So it was on my list of outside reading. They could choose from about 8 works, and they had to write an extended essay and do background, um, get background information on the author, and quite a few of my kids did. One woman, my students, one woman lives just down the street from me, and she told me, and others have said, that was such a wonderful novel. I mean, it's hard, it's disturbing. So I said, "What is there that makes it pornographic and or sensitive materials?" I said, and he said, "Well, there's a rape." And I said, "A rape is an act of violence." And I said, "The definition of pornography is the sole purpose is to sexually stimulate. And if somebody is, that's really sick." And he didn't say any more. But they had never banned it. And so, granted, last year they did a review of Beloved after Jill, couldn't teach it, expedited the review because I called the superintendent and said, "What is going on? Are they thought police going to come and yank it out of their hands?" Because if a book is banned, a kid cannot even have it at school. Who's going to take it away? Is somebody watching? Is somebody going to come in and rip it off their desk, out of their hands? And so,
Like, they're not supposed to even have it in their backpack if it's banned?
no, but I mean, who's going to see it, you
Right.
know? So a lot of the kids were furious. Jill's students wanted to have a sit in, and parents wrote emails to the district. But when I called Ben Horsley, he said, "Well, Carol, I think the world of you and Jill, my daughter." And he said, "But if she goes ahead and teaches it before they do the review, she could lose her license. They could report her to UPAC." I mean, this is how crazy it is, Kason. And so they did an expedited review, and it's now been approved. And I always thought it had been, and so had Jill, because they had a category on the Granite website that said books for college level students only. But nobody told Jill that they took that down a few years ago. I mean, she didn't look it up every year. And so, anyway, so The Bluest Eye is now banned, and it is just despicable. And I posted this on Facebook, and you should read all the responses from people. From some say I'm an AP teacher, and with the others just say I read that when I was younger. And it's difficult stuff, but slavery is difficult. So are a lot of things in life. And it doesn't describe detail. The Kite Runner is another very beautiful novel that has, for the same reason, is on that list, because there's a rape. It shows how women are treated in Afghanistan. But I mean, what is pornographic? What is sexually stimulating? I mean, it's just these people are sick, Kason.
Yeah, I read The Kite Runner, and I know what you're talking about with it. So these are books that are now banned statewide across all of Utah.
Uh-huh. With 3 districts, or 2 districts and 3 charter schools. But what I pointed out when I posted, if you're on Facebook, look at my post. What I pointed out was the fact that it could just be 1 or 2 people like Nicolene Peck or that Brooke Stevens. They complain wherever they put their complaint in to the school district, I guess, or the school board. And then in Davis County, there's some really good people fighting that, but there's some really crazy people there. And then they review it. So it might only be a couple people that are, and then that was the second sensitive material bill. The first one wasn't as bad because you had to review it within your district or within a school. So a school board member, PTA, parent volunteers, and Julie Jackson, who's on the Granite School District and running for my seat, she said it was hard to get parents from various schools when a book got challenged. See, first they challenge it, and because they were afraid of the right wing. If they said, "Well, I think this is okay," some people on my post said, "We read that book when our kids had difficult books. We'd read it with them and discuss it with them, because, much of history is difficult. People are slaughtered and murdered and raped and pillaged, and horrible things happen. But what you learn from literature is empathy and, understanding. And see, most of these books have LGBTQ kids, or, they're kids of color. They all fit a pattern that they have one of those two things in it. And anyway, well, I'll quit talking and let you talk.
No, that's interesting.
Now, tell me where you teach. Where do you teach?
So I'm at Valley Junior right now.
Oh, that's where Jill taught when she first started. She almost didn't leave there because she had a great assignment. She was 9th grade honors English, and then she was the advisor for the student body officers, and she just loved it. And she was married then, and a couple of years later she was divorced, and she was at Valley, and she gotten an apartment then, and a friend of mine that taught at Skyline called and said, somebody's leaving Skyline in the English department. You ought to ask Jill if she is interested. And I called her, and she goes, oh, Mom, my life's been so unsettled and I'm happy here. She lives on the east side, so it wasn't as convenient. And I said, Jill, you may never get another chance to teach at Skyline. It's kind of like Olympus. People don't leave unless they retire or they die.
Yeah.
And so she did, and she's been there 28 years now. She's retiring though this year.
Oh, congrats to her. That sounds
34 years.
She's had a good career.
Yeah.
Real quick with those.
Yeah. Tell me about what you're doing now.
Yeah. So this group is History Education Foundation. So we're a new nonprofit that started in the summer. We have interns that work with us, and we're focused on like public history and civics education. So we do a lot with social media, creating videos on different historical topics or civics topics, or doing Canva posts and interviews like this that are informative for the public. But then we also are creating lesson plans for teachers. We're creating lesson plans that different social studies teachers can use and try to implement. And then we're also trying to produce research. I've been working on my doctorate. I'm finishing up this semester at Utah State. And so it's in curriculum and instruction, but focused on like history education.
That's fabulous. Now, are you married or you have kids? I don't know.
I'm not married. No, I don't have kids.
Well, so you can afford to be going to school and teaching.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, do you want to go into administration eventually? Is that the idea? Yeah,
so I'm doing an internship for like an assistant principal position next year with Granite. And so I'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think administration could potentially be a pretty good path.
Do you know where it is? Yeah.
No, we'll do like round robin interviews where principals meet with all of the potential interns, and we kind of just rotate, like talk with each principal for however many minutes. And then I think they kind of rank who they want, and the district just places us based on rankings.
So do you know Taylor Cater?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm promoting his working hard on his campaign. His signs out in my yard, and I've endorsed him and done a video. So is Jill. See, he went to Skyline and he was student body president there. Then he went to the U and he got a master's degree in education. He was student body president there, or ASUU president. And then he came back to Skyline and taught AP European for 10 years. His wife went there too. She was also in Jill's AP class. And then he was principal at Driggs just for a couple of years, and they loved him there. I mean, my neighbor kids go there, and I've talked to parents that kids went there. And then they made this position for him at the district, which he's probably ideal at, but I think it'd be kind of grueling because he's the liaison to hear all the complaints from teachers and parents. I mean, he's doing problem solving and whatever you call it.
That's what I've heard. I didn't know that it was teachers too. I'd heard it was parents, but
maybe it is just parents, but I kind of thought it was teachers too. I could be wrong, but
yeah, maybe he has a good personality for it, but that does sound like a tough time, like a lot a
I
lot
thought
of maybe
maybe yeah,
negativity.
I thought maybe he asked them for a district position. I mean, I think Ben Horsey likes him very much because, according to Jill, he's told her that he always wanted to be in the legislature. That's been a goal of his. And you can't be gone 7 weeks from being a principal. I mean, he's like John Arthur, like I was still
Yeah,
teaching when I started. I had a substitute, a really good substitute, but you can't be gone from being a principal.
yeah. That wouldn't be very
No, it would
realistic.
be very disruptive.
Remind me the year that you entered the legislature and maybe describe a little bit about like how you got into it, the
Okay.
campaigning.
Mhm. Okay, um, I filed in 2000, and then I campaigned that year, and then I was started in 2001 was the session. And, I've told this story a lot of times in speeches, but anyway, I'll just say this. Well, this part I haven't given speeches on, but my cousin Tricia Snarbeck was in the legislature then. She lives in Sandy, and she called me at the end of a session and said, "Carol, you need to run against Ray Short. He's terrible on public education." And she grew up in East Mill Creek and went to schools there in Skyline, as did her brother Dan Snar. And her sister Sue's married to John Curtis, our U.S. Senator.
Oh, okay.
And he was a Democrat first, too. The
Yeah.
Snars are mostly Democrats, but John's now a Republican. But that's
Yeah.
he could never win. And he was mayor of Provo. And Dan Snar, Tricia's brother, was mayor of Murray for 3 terms, but that's nonpartisan. Okay, so I was at a point in my career where I loved teaching. I couldn't tolerate grading papers anymore. I was at the point and I think, oh, teach Crime and Punishment again. Hamlet. Well, yeah, I could have changed, but Kaysen, at that point, did I want to do all new lesson plans? And you know what I mean? I mean, I changed it up over the years, but so it was just, and I had remarried. I was married to Bob Moss, and he was, he said, "Oh, that's fine if you want to do that. That's great." He liked politics. So Ray had said things that were in the paper, like teachers are a bunch of whiners. I'd seen his quotes. We were on strike in the late 90s, and I taught 4 of his 8 kids. And I thought back then you could get a deduction for every dependent. So
Mhm.
he probably paid 0 in state income tax. So his kids got 8 kids. They got great education. At least one is a lawyer. I don't know. They've probably done well. And so I thought, well, what can I lose, But I'd never been in politics before. So I had people like Patrice Arent reach out and kind of tag team. Jackie Biskupski called me, Ralph Beck, and Karen Morgan was in. And instead of having we got together and they helped prep me. Nowadays the party has training and the Capitol has training, but on how to campaign. And I got a lot of great ideas from Patrice and others, and they just really helped me. And so,
How did you know like Patrice before being in the legislature?
well, I just knew of her because she was the rep for this area, not mine, but close by.
Mhm.
And now eventually that became my area.
Yeah.
And then she ran for the state senate, and that was this district. But I just had heard of her, and I thought, I remember one year when she called me and tag teamed with Tricia, and I said, "Well, Patrice, I haven't been active in church. I do now. I'm active LDS, but I wasn't then." And I said, "I've been divorced and I don't have money." She said, "Carol, I'm Jewish and I've been divorced." And she said, "You don't use your own money." And she was right. She's never spent her own money, and she's wealthy, her family money. And you raise money because if people see your list of supporters, which they can see online, those because I know people have said, well, I could self-fund. And I said, well, if the public looks at your disclosure, they think you don't have any supporters. I had hundreds by the time I was done, you
Mhm.
know? And so anyway, they coached me and helped me um, and let's see so I was teaching then, and so I told all my classes, I had all seniors, most AP, 4 AP, and I had 1 or 2 concurrent enrollment classes, and I taught student body officer advisor. That was a class period. Um, I just call it student government, but Anyway, when I told all my students, and a lot of them said, well, we want to help you. So on Saturdays, they'd meet me in a parking lot and we'd organize them 2 by 2. That was old style. Then we go to Kinko's and print out a little map and area, and they'd go walking in that area. It was all around Olympus High too. See, I live at about 6 minutes from Olympus. And so people say, well, why are you helping her? And how do you know her? And they'd say, well, she's our English teacher. Well, are you doing this for extra credit? No, we just like her. And I said once to them before they went out, do your parents know that I'm a Democrat? And they said, I don't know. I don't think they care. And one kid was Ray Short's nephew. And so,
And he was helping you?
yeah.
He was helping you when you were running against his uncle.
Yeah, but I think his family didn't particularly like Ray.
Okay.
And he was chair of revenue and tax, and just coincidentally, when I got elected, I got put on that committee, and I walked in the first day. It was 9:00, supposed to start. Nobody was there but the staff, and I said, I'm new. Is this the right place? Revenue and tax. I'm a new legislator, and I told them my name, and they said, oh, you beat Ray Short. He was the chairman of this committee. So anyway, he got wind of the fact that all these kids were coming out and that I had momentum, because he didn't walk all the districts. He'd put up billboards. Once he came to my house, he told me started the Salt Lake Gang task force or something. But he said, Carol's a nice lady and a good teacher. She should stay in the classroom. Now, is that classic or what? The little lady. So he didn't know what hit him. I won by like 1,500 votes. And I didn't think that was very close. And this friend of mine that stayed at my house in this very room where I am till late at night, till we've got the final results, I said, well, it's only 1,500. And she said, Carol, think of an auditorium. Think of the school. It holds about 1,500 people. That's a lot of people. But what did I know about politics? I'd followed it from the time I was a teenager. I was 17 when John F. Kennedy was inaugurated, and I just fell in love with the whole idea. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what, idealistic teenager. And
Right.
and all my life, while I was teaching and I was raising children, I read the newspaper every day. I always watched the news. I grew up that way. We had Time magazine, and back then everybody had a newspaper. You'd walk out on the driveway and get your newspaper. And I followed politics, so I knew I was a Democrat. I mean, I lived through the civil rights era, and I was.
Did you knew that as like a teenager, like Vietnam War growing up, like you were like, I'm more on the side of the Democrats?
I was in college, and my first husband, Mike Spackman, when we decided to get married, and we were just 20, 21, he didn't ever say I got married so he wouldn't have to go to Vietnam, but a lot of his friends and fraternity brothers went on missions.
Mm-hmm.
They went to graduate school, or if they had a father that was in the National Guard or somebody that could get him in the National Guard, they did, because nobody wanted to go to that war. And if you remember, George W. Bush, when he was running, a story came out that he used his dad's influence to get in the National Guard. Like, oh, shameful. I told people, every guy did, because they didn't want to go to war.
Hmm.
And so that was, one of those unpopular wars, and those poor guys. I had a brother-in-law whose twin brother was killed in Vietnam, and they were both in the same area near the Mekong Delta, and they should never have had brothers. I've seen his name on the Vietnam Wall. Um, but yes, I knew I was a Democrat then. I, I wasn't out protesting the civil rights, but I followed it all, and I've always just felt strongly after. I mean, I used to read those slave narratives and teach.
Right.
You learn from novels and plays and what people done that were brought here, not of their own volition, and then treated the way they were. And that's why I'm so averse to book banning, because I didn't have experiences being in war. And you teach books like Going After Cacciato and others, and you read books, and students read books that you know you, then you have an understanding of what it's like. My father was killed in World War II. He was 19 right before the end of the war. And my mother did remarry, but I mean, I grew up without a father, and I went to college on the War Orphans Benefit Plan, which is like the GI Bill. And every quarter, then after I got married, we moved to Salt Lake because my husband Mike was he grew up here, and there weren't any jobs in Logan. And then I finished at the U.
So
But
you were really young. You were really young when your dad died. Were you like a baby, or
I
like
was 1 year old.
you're 1 years old and your dad
Yeah, I
died
have
in
a
World War
couple
II?
photos of him holding me, and I have a scrapbook right back here that has articles from the Ogden paper saying, Ogden soldier missing in action. Bombardier Newell McCarroll Maxnar missing in action. His parents are, and named them, and my mother and a daughter, Carol Ann. They call me Carol Ann. And then I have another article that says that his body was found and he was pronounced dead. And then it was 3 weeks before the end of the war. They flew out of a base in England over to, they were on a bombing mission to Berlin. He was a side gunner. And if you've ever been inside or seen the inside of a B-17, he was a big man, and it's a very small quarters. I mean, they were not safe in any way. And it went down in northern Germany, and he was buried, as a lot of soldiers were, in the American cemetery in the Netherlands, called, what's the name of the place? Well, anyway, it was an American cemetery, and they were crosses, the white crosses. So when I used to read that in Flanders Field, the poppies grow between the crosses, row and row, I just cry. And then Dutch families adopted American graves. So I spent time every summer in Ogden with my Snar grandparents. My stepdad was in the Forest Service. We moved all the time, like the military, when he was going on his upward success. He ended up in DC. But do you know what, Kason? I went to two junior highs in two different states, two elementary schools in Idaho and Utah, three high schools. Every year I went to a different high school in a different state because he was transferred. I graduated from San Rafael High. I went to Reno High my junior year, Bora High and Boise my sophomore year, and ninth grade there too. And
Was that challenging to move around so
yeah,
much,
I
and
was
like,
an
you feel like it
unhappy
was hard to get
teenager.
roots?
So I read books. I'm surrounded by books here. And I
Yeah,
have
that's
books in
great.
other
I love
rooms.
that.
I read a lot. My mother would say she's very good at, she was a piano teacher, and we played piano, and she'd always get I had half siblings, brother and two sisters, and to piano lessons, and my brother into scouts, and get us into, I took piano and other things. And, but she'd say, Carol, you'll always be able to meet people and make friends. And when I tell people that story, I said, well, that was true. And I said, yeah, but I was outgoing anyway. But I really did, Case, and have to say, hi, my name's Carol. I'm new, and it was hard. And it wasn't the popular kids that had reached. My biggest fear then, and I've told this to students I've talked to before, that, when we talk about how fitting in and being from different backgrounds or other things. And I say, but what I did was always, I liked choral music too, and I sang. I'd always join a choir, and some kids have said, "Yeah, I did that too," or they joined sports teams. But see, girls, they didn't have girls sports, um, so yeah, it did kind of help me out probably because I had to be more assertive. But I'm getting off topic. But what did I know about politics and how the legislature worked? Okay, I knew nothing about how it worked. Um, so I was telling a friend of mine who was a fourth grade teacher, I don't even know how a bill becomes a law. So she gave me this chart that had a flow chart showing, it goes to this committee and then it goes to the House, but it didn't make sense. But what you have to do it, it isn't that hard,
Yeah.
you just have to do it. And, I mean, you don't have to have been. See, I always thought you had to be like in a city council or, work your way up. And that's nice, but you don't. There are plenty of people like me that never had planned to. A lot of the men have been mayors or, county commissioners or, some kind of, that kind of background. But,
You just
um,
went straight for the state legislature and
uh-huh,
without doing the
uh-huh,
city or
yeah,
county
yeah. And you
stuff.
know what? Here's the thing that really, though, benefited me. I live, as I said, not far from Olympus, and I right now could go. If you were here at my house, I'd say I taught the lady in that house, the one there, up the lane behind me, the two there, up around the circle. Everywhere I go to this day, when I'm out walking, I go walking every day for a couple hours, couple miles. People stop me and say, and they stopped me at Costco and other places. But I knocked on thousands of doors, and you have no idea how many people came to the door and said, "Mrs. Spackman." See, I when I remarried, I tried to be Carol Moss, and I'd already been 24 years Mrs. Spackman. So kids said, "My mother calls you Mrs. Spackman. Is it Spackman or Moss?" And I said, "Well, it doesn't matter." But that's why I use Spackman in my signs. I'll have that. And
Yeah.
many people said, "Oh, I never would have known that was you." But Kason, here's the thing about a teacher, unless you're a teacher that is terrible or the kids hated you, uh, that made all the difference. I cannot tell you how many families voted for me and put my signs up, and some of them got in trouble with their Republican precinct chairs. "Why do you have Carol Moss, that Democrat, sign in your yard?" Well, she taught all 6 of our kids. And so this is the thing. If you ever want to go into politics, people trust teachers. And when I started going back to church some years ago, but this last election, a lot of the people in my ward, it's an older ward, um, they say, they said, "Congratulations on your win, Carol. You're the only Democrat I ever vote for, or we only cross over for you." And I think, "Oh, hell, you voted for Trump." you know? So, but that was,
They vote for Trump and Carol Spackman Moss, both in
uh-huh.
the same
Yeah,
same
exactly.
guy.
So I could knock on a door and be in West Murray, 700 West. I still remember I had a new campaign manager and I was having them walk with me and just hear how I'd talk at the door. And the guy answered the door. The first one, he had gray in his hair and had a little beard. And I said, "Hi, I'm Carol Spackman Moss running for," and he goes, "Mrs. Spackman, I was in your English class and da da da, 78 or something." And I'd say, "Oh, what's your name?" And often I don't always remember their names. I remember a lot, but like, "Oh, who were some of the people you hung around with?" And I could usually kind of get a sense. But the guy has gray hair, the boy guys are bald, some of. And I
Yeah.
said, "Well, here, let me tell you about some of the things I've done." I had my door hanger. And he said, "Just put a sign out there. I c I know you. I don't care." And that's really worked for me. And I I mean, I don't know if I would have been successful. I didn't have a connection. It's having a connection to your
Yeah.
community that's important.
How many years did you teach before running for, your state
33,
house seat? Oh, you were
33.
33 years teaching and then running in the same area that you taught in.
correct. And today, church, this woman that spoke is the state primary president. She lives farther south than me. And I told a couple people sitting by me, she was in my AP class. So was her husband. She's a fabulous speaker. She's just full of energy. People love this. Is the second time she's been invited to speak at our award. The way she uses her hands and she is so engaging. And she was my substitute the first year. I retired after that year, but I got her to substitute because she just gotten an English degree at BYU, and her husband was one of my AP students, and had just finished architecture school, and she knew the kids because she grew up in the neighborhood, and she knew the subjects. And she taught Hamlet for me, among other things. And I told her, these are the things you can teach. Here are the files. And you know what? She didn't call me once to say, oh, what do I do with this? She was very comfortable with, she did a great job. And I could have stayed longer, but I had to go right back, like on Monday, finish on a Friday. Like this year, I got home at 1:30 in the morning. I had to go right back and then, bam, start getting the kids ready for the AP exam. So I didn't have any break. Some people that have jobs somewhere, they say, well, I'm taking next week off because I need to R&R, So, but it was only the grading papers and nights, weekends, holidays. And like Jill, my daughter, has all these AP and IB kids. They're smart and highly motivated. She had 12 letters of recommendation to do over Thanksgiving. And those kids are so motivated. They go, do you have my letter? Do you have my letter? And they were applying for early decision. And I don't know about all of them, but the first 6 that got notified first got into schools like Stanford and Yale and University of Chicago, So, you feel sometimes people think it's easier to teach smart kids. Well, it's kind of a trade-off. Yes, it is more stimulating, but they expect you to get feedback, and they're engaged, and their parents are too,
There's other demands that come with it that you might not have it.
Mhm.
And it's right. And like at Granger and these schools, like they're smart kids, but it's not maybe the same demand level. There maybe those kids are applying to the University of Utah and Weber and not Stanford and Harvard, like the way that some of the Olympus kids are.
My students went kind of half, and some went to elite schools, but for the most part, they either went to BYU or the U.
Yeah.
And they'd say of BYU, the kids tell me that it was really demanding. It was like being in AP classes because their admission requirements are really high. And if you look at on the website, it recommends they take AP and IB and all the honors classes they can. And a few of my students that I recall would transfer to the U because it was more convenient or something. And they'd say, my BYU classes were harder. They said it was like their classes at BYU would have national merit scholars because they come from all over the country.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting too. I've always, when people kind of act like BYU's sort of second rate. No, it's not. It's not.
Yeah, I think my understanding, like the departments, right? Like accounting and law and some of those departments, those are like some of the top. And I could be biased because I like Weber's history program and know people at the U, but I haven't heard that BYU's history program is maybe the same level of free thought as some of the other universities. I'm sure it's rigorous.
Yeah, I think it's more restrictive from what I've read.
Yeah.
The man that was just named one of the new apostles was the education guy, and I read a huge article about him that a lot of people, he kind of purged the department as far as loyalty.
Yeah.
And a number of professors left because they didn't like the restriction about how much you had to connect it to the religion. I mean, the LDS Church is my faith community. I'm not the
Sure.
most devout in the world, you know what I mean? There are
Sure.
things I'm not. My
I'm with
husband wasn't, my kids aren't interested in it. It's just that it's where I feel comfortable. And I sing in the choir and I
sure.
like that. And I have, people I like. So am I
Yeah.
getting off topic? You asked me the
No,
questions.
no, we're good. I wanted to wrap back. So you mentioned going to other states for school. So you came back to Utah, and you say that you were at the U.
No, I went to USU first.
You went to USU first. You went to
Mhm.
Logan.
Yeah, for
Okay.
2 years. And then I transferred to the U. Because we got
Which,
married and Mike grew up in Salt Lake and went to East High, but uh, and I got pregnant and he was getting a bachelor in fine arts and he needed he needed to make money. So
sure.
see, I had that money that I had to finish by time I was 22. That was, the government was paying for my college.
Right.
So I finished first. And so, and I liked the U. It was just that I was in a sorority at the U and I went to, when you go to Utah State, there's nothing to do. So we went to all the games, you were engaged in the community. Here is a commuter school. We lived just below the U then. And, then I was pregnant. I mean, I just went to class and came home. I didn't really I made a few friends, but you know what I mean? I didn't have a social life there like I did.
Yeah. And
But
were there protests? So you mentioned like Vietnam War happening when you were in college, right? Were there a lot of like protests within
no,
Utah?
I just remember going on South Temple once during the Vietnam War because I don't know if somebody was in town from the Republican. I just remember standing with crowds yelling, "Hell no!" Something we don't want any
And
war. I don't know.
so you went to the protest and joined in.
No,
Or
I stood
you
on the
just saw it.
sidelines and yelled. I didn't march, but
Okay.
I wished at that time kind of wished I was single because see, when we went to San Rafael, they didn't have AP, but I was in college prep or something, and the teacher thought I was a good writer, and he suggested I enter a writing contest for Marin County, and it was on people with disabilities or something, and so I won the contest. I probably got $100 in Marin County. I don't know if you know where Marin County is. It's north of San Francisco. My stepdad worked in the city and he'd, cross the Golden Gate Bridge every day to go to work. But I met Gavin Newsom a couple of years ago at a fundraiser in Park City, and I said, "Oh, I went to I graduated from San Rafael High in Marin County. Do you know that area?" And he goes, "Well, I went to Redwood High School. I graduated in Redwood High, and it's just across. It'd be like Skyline, Olympus."
Mhm.
In fact, I read that they moved their kid. They bought a place in Marin County, so their kids, they have 4 kids, could go to school there, even though, he's in Sacramento. They weren't I
Interesting.
guess they weren't happy with the schools in Sacramento, or maybe just
Yeah.
because the kids, it was too close to be, But, so
Did you like Gavin? Like, in your interactions, was he very
yeah, I
personable
thought he
and
was
nice with
really
you?
charismatic. When he spoke, it was someone's home in Park City. I have a few pictures. One of them, he's leaning over talking to me, and, he's really tall and I'm short.
How tall would you say he is? Like 6'3",
Six
maybe? Or
6'2" or 3. Yeah,
okay.
he's tall. He's very handsome too. And I have a photo of him standing in front of the fireplace, and he has a little more gray in his hair now, but he is very charismatic as a speaker. When I stood there, listened to him, I thought, "Man, you're like a white Obama." He had that, you
Do you
know?
think he'll be president?
I don't know.
We'll see.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know how they love to bash California and use everything that's negative about California. If you show pictures of downtown LA and San Francisco, and that's all people see, and then you bring in ICE, and I mean, youngest daughter and her husband raised their kids there, right in LA, Westchester, near the airport and near Marina Del Rey. And the public school there wasn't good, so they went to a private school till 8th grade. And then they moved to Palos Verdes, which is a peninsula just south of there, and to Palos Verdes High, which is a lot like Olympus and Skyline, a lot of AP and so on. And when the governor, Cox, vilifies California, we don't want to be like California. And then, do you know that I did a podcast with Trevor Lee when he first, right
Oh,
before his
interesting.
first session. And KUER has this podcast called State Street that they do all during this session. And so they asked me to do one with him. And we did it the week before the session started, and then they played it the first day. So it was titled Veteran Lawmaker Gives Advice to Freshmen. And he was really quite pleasant. I mean, I'd heard he was a firebrand, and we had no idea he was a scammer and a cheat and a liar then, but didn't, he was young, and he'd beaten Steve Handy at convention, and Steve was one of my favorite Republicans.
What year was this that he beat Steve Handy?
So this is Trevor's 4th year. So
Okay.
yeah, 4 years
Maybe
ago.
like 2022 or 2021, somewhere around there. Okay.
Yeah, Steve Handy's now the head of the DABC, but gosh, just a stellar person. And he was just demoralized. And then he did a write-in campaign and tried to beat him again and didn't. But this is sometime during the podcast, he made the same comment about, we don't want to be like California. And I said, let me tell you something about California. I have a daughter, and her raised her family there till they came here to college. And I have stepchildren there in Southern California. And there are great neighborhoods. There are great schools. They're wonderful people. And I added this just for effect. And it's the second largest LDS population in the United States after Utah. And I didn't add this. There are about 9 temples. I mean, I was just doing that for effect. And I said, so when you show pictures, when, the right likes to show photos of how California has been destroyed by Republican governors or Democrats. That's downtown LA. That's a few blocks where they had those ICE officers. That's like 4 blocks. And downtown San Francisco is a mess. And Bob and I used to go there a lot because he has a sister in San Leandro just across the bay. And like I said, I went to high school there, and my parents then and siblings, my mother and stepfather and siblings, finished high school there. They were there about 6-7 years. But see, I was just there that 1 year, and I planned to come back to Utah because my father, who was killed, his family, I wanted to be close to them. He had 4 sisters, and Ogden was the hometown. And so I was the only child of their only son, so I wanted to be around them. But San Francisco downtown, I'll tell you what I think did more to create the terrible situation they had. COVID came, and all those people, because my stepdad worked in the financial district, the Forest Service office was in the financial district. All these people worked from home. So all these office buildings, San Francisco is a very small area with all these buildings, and they worked remotely. So all these cafes and really charming restaurants. And, when I was a senior, we had prom in the city. We'd always called it the city. You'd go over the city to concerts and things. And it just sort of wiped out the population that kept the downtown. And there was a big Nordstrom. Bob and I loved that shopping mall at the end of I want to say State Street. It's not State Street. Right where the trolley car goes down. And you know what? That big mall, it was a beautiful mall. It had great restaurants and stores. And next door was a museum of art. Do you know what? It closed last year, the final beautiful mall, and closed because then you started to see more people. Everyone, when I was younger, you'd walk down the street and you'd see somebody lying off and, kind of against a building, and you just kind of ignored them. But it was very rare, they were drunk or something or on drugs. But they didn't do anything. It just became more and more and more homeless, and then the tents. And I mean, I just saw pictures. I didn't, but it was uninhabitable for people. It wasn't safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it sounds like they try to set that up kind of as a straw man to say, like, look at how bad California is.
Yes,
Therefore,
yes. So I
don't vote for
defended it, but
Democrats.
when we finished and walked out to the car, I said to Trevor, "Well, what do you do? What is your profession?" He said, "I'm a wealth manager." And when all this story came out, I actually listened to those videos, and those men just said, "He is this liar and a cheat, and he defrauded us." And then each man, separate videos, said he came to them just sobbing and crying, "Oh, I'm going to lose everything." And so his wife had a child by another marriage who just went on a mission, is going on a mission because he showed it on Facebook. Here's my stepdaughter. He calls her our daughter, pretty girl, standing there opening her thing. Oh, she's going to Texas. And his wife has had four children in the last 5 years. So he's posted photos in front of a temple. I don't know what temple it is, all dressed in white. These little kids, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the stepdaughter and his wife. His wife's a pretty lady. She's a nurse. And they're standing in front of the temple, and he goes, "The best day of my life. We were sealed for time and eternity." And then but I on his bio, where you put in the directory and stuff, it says profession, wealth manager. What the hell is that, Kaysen? Is it? I thought it meant a financial advisor, but he has an associate's degree from Weber. So how did he become? Because when Steve Handy beat Steve Handy, he'd just gotten a job at Home Depot. And after the conventions that Saturday, when Steve had no idea he'd have all those people there, and Steve was done, Trevor came to his door and said, "Oh, I should have asked you this, but I just got a job at Home Depot. How much time does this legislative job take?" What?
That is wild.
I don't think he became a manager or anything overnight, because then I think he lost the job, because Steve said he went around that summer and in a pickup and stuck his signs everywhere. So I have thought this very seriously ever since he's gotten in now, that he was scamming. Something would come out, and sure enough, it did. I wasn't even surprised.
And this isn't something I've looked at too extensively. I've seen maybe a little bit in the news about reports that he was committing fraud. Going back to the legislature, right? You're talking about working with Trevor Lee. What have been some of the most like memorable moments that you can remember in your 26 years of serving? Any specific like colleagues that really stick out to you, maybe similar to Trevor Lee but different, that a lot of the public might not know or remember?
Yeah, I do have a story. So when I heard about a student came to me, a college student, in 2013, and had an appointment with me, and he seemed really nervous. He's like, he just put on a tie, wasn't used to it, and hair kind of slicked down, and said, "I'm really never done this before, but I'm with the harm reduction project, and too many of my friends are dying of overdoses." And I just started hearing about the opioid overdoses, and I'd never heard of naloxone, or they call it Narcan, but I didn't know there was a reversal drug, and he explained it to me. And he had a model legislation from Berkeley, University of California, and he asked me if I'd run a bill. Well, it was too late in the session, that you can't just, it wasn't time to have it drafted and so on and get it prepared. So the following year I ran the first one, and then I did a Good Samaritan bill because Jen Plum, who's now a senator, but then was Dr. Plum, heard I was doing this bill, and she came and got acquainted with me. And then she got a doctor from the VA hospital who's since retired, moved out of state. And he said, he was a PharmD doctor. He said, we have all these veterans coming back from wars in the Middle East, and they've gotten addicted to drugs, and they go through treatment, and then they get out and they relapse really quickly. And then Jen Plum's 22-year-old brother had died of an overdose. He was using cocaine, good family and his friends. He was 22, using drugs. And his friends all abandoned him and he died. She said they even hid stuff under the dirt outside the house, paraphernalia. So they all abandoned him because they were afraid they'd get arrested. And so my Senate sponsor was Kurt Bramble. And I kind of don't exactly remember how we got to know each other, but we did. And we're very different. He's a bully, blah, 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 talk like this, kind of known as a bully and kind of blustery. And he did bills over the years, like the last few years before he retired, like, that harm transgender kids and so on. But we did a number of bills together. We did some of those bills. We did refugee services because some constituent reached out to me and said she was mentoring this refugee family. And the mother, the dad I kept going back to Africa. He probably had another wife, but she worked at a hotel as a maid, and they were on assistance. The kids all went to Olympus. I used to see the cross country team running after school, after she told me about this family. And this boy, way taller than the rest, it was Kenya or one of those countries, where they have smaller heads and really lean bodies, they're known. And he towered this black kid above the other kids, and I knew that was their child. But she couldn't get her license renewed because she didn't know English well enough to pass the written test. She just kept failing and failing. And then she had to quit her job, and she started taking the bus to the DI where she got a job, and she got hit by a car crossing State Street. And then that's what started me. And so Kurt and I did legislation for refugees like her to get their licenses, their written license by using interpreters. And in her case, it took almost 2 years, and they got somebody from Denver. She now works at the Wellington Assisted Living where my mother was, and my daughter worked there for a while, hiring people. So Kurt and I got an award from the Refugee Services, And I posted pictures of us getting this award on Facebook. And I remember a couple of Democrats saying, "How can you work with Kurt Bramble?" And I said, because we come together on things. And a few years ago, when I called him to see if he'd sponsor something, he said, he was in Mexico or something, and he said, "Just put my name on it, Carol. Any bill you want me to sponsor, I will." And you know what? I had that kind of relationship with Todd Weiler. Last year, he did a bill for me. I did bills with Don Ibsen. Let's see. Who's the pharmacist? Evan Vickers, and Jen Plum. I mean, I've done them but honestly, I do better with Republican men. And I tell you that when people are saying about Nate online, this big argument about Nate Bluin, well, the reason he hasn't passed a bill in 4 years is those right wing won't let any Democrat do any of those Democrats. This one guy posted, do any of the 10 Democrats in the legislature get anything done? And I said, excuse me, but I told him how many there were. I've gotten many bills passed, and that's because I know how to make form relationships with the other side. And I said, lots of Democrats pass a lot of bills. Patrice Arndt used to pass a lot. And you know what? that came from my ability to form relationships. And I've given this speech many times when I'm asked, how did your background help you in politics? I said, if you teach school, it's all about communication. You have all these different students with different learning styles and abilities. You have to figure out, how do I communicate with this kid? You have to get along with parents and administrators, so you have stakeholders. But most of all, I know how to create relationships with people. And so do you, Kason. So I used to think you had to have a political science background, you had to, be a lawyer, or like I told you, have money. No, I can't think of a better background for going into politics now than being a teacher. And John Arthur's a perfect example of it too. And other people who've
That
been,
makes
Marie Polson, same thing. She was a teacher. She
Right.
did very well. No, I don't pass 10 bills a session. I only got one passed last year. I was very disappointed. But other years I've had 4 or 5. And it's all because I know how to work with the other side. And I think that's better government. As I think I said to begin with, this country was founded on a two-party system. And when one party is always dominant, and you can see what's happened with a crazy, deranged madman for president, it could destroy the country.
Right. With Congress, right? So Congress, you can have coalitions formed, and it seems like people can sometimes pass things a little bit more, even if they're aggressive on social media. But Utah being aggressive on social media, if you're in the minority, that probably makes things a little more challenging. With time in the legislature, do you remember a lot about like was it 2008 that there was the big voucher push?
Oh, it was it was later than that. It was
It was
just
later than 2008?
It was just a few years ago.
Or what was there was one that
Something, oh, let's see. But the voucher, the Utah, just a second. My daughter texted me something about coming over here after work. Just a minute. I just have to tell her I'll be here.
And then, yeah, also I want to be respectful of your time, and I also have a family dinner, so I maybe have like 10 more minutes or so.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. I'll stop talking. Just ask me questions. I'll be shorter.
No, we're good. I think there was a like an earlier voucher program. So I'm reading about one that was in like November 2007. Utah voters like rejected the nation's first universal school voucher.
Oh, yeah, they called it like backpack funding or something. I remember, yeah, but it wasn't as big as this last one.
Mm-hmm.
The Utah Fits All, $122 million so far on that one.
With that one, I mean, kind of speaking to public education and the value of public education, do you feel like the Utah Fits All one is undermining public education, and that's going to have negative effects for it long term?
Oh, 100%. Listen to this statistic. Write this down so you can remember it. $122 million, Taylor Cater gave me this, would pay for 2,300 full-time teachers. And this, I've given this speech. I gave it on the floor of the House on committee. This Utah Fits All, when it first passed, it had like 80 million or 40. And then the next year they got another 40 and then another. It has no accountability. They don't have to test kids, homeschool kids. They don't have to test private schools. They can be parochial schools. Now, I know parochial schools. I've had people tell me, like a lady I know taught public schools. Her son's the principal at Judge, and they have testing. But I'll tell you the one thing about Judge and private schools, if a kid is difficult, because I had an attorney call me this year and tell me this, who used to be at the State Office of Education, and she was going to talk to Judge and the Reed School or the Cardin School, one of those private. They kicked the kid out because of their behavior, and guess what? They left the scholarship at the school. They didn't get the scholarship money back. But okay, they don't have to take kids with disabilities. Oh no, we can't take kids with autism. Oh no, we can't take a kid with dyslexia or whatever. And as I say, if their behavior's not what they like, kick them out. So when we're in great need of more social workers and smaller class sizes and 122 million, one of the first things I learned being in the legislature and heard over and over again is that we are accountable to the taxpayers for how we spend their money. And I take that charge very seriously. And I think the majority do. But a lot of them just pay lip service. How in the world can you say that that's an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars? And I predicted to be rife with fraud within 2 years. It only took 1 year. They bought ski passes, they bought trampolines. Oh, for their neurodivergent child, bouncing is a good thing. Oh, fine, buy your own damn trampoline. Pay for your own private school. My grandkids that went to a great private school in LA, they paid double the property taxes that I do here in Holiday. They never complained. It was their choice. They
Right.
sacrificed. So no accountability, just giving money away. And so they fired that company and they put guardrails on it. And many of those homeschoolers don't actually educate their kids themselves. Some of them do. And how much experience do they have? It's very rare. You might get a parent who can do math and calculus and everything and teach English, but they put them in front of a screen and they use the money to pay for an online program. And so when they said this last year, they couldn't do that anymore, I got emails from people saying, well, this is just terrible. We've been using this blah, blah, blah online thing. And, now we can't get it. So, you know what I'm saying? And then a lot of them had private music teachers come to their home for instruments and voice lessons. I paid for my kids to be in ballet and piano and, all those things. And
So it sounds like they were things that they would have been paying for anyway. They were
uh-huh,
trying to use
they were
this voucher
using
money that was getting
precisely. Uh-huh.
pulled from public schools, and it's like they would have been doing those things anyway. It's
No
normal expenses that families
accountability,
have.
no accountability, government giveaway. I think it's the worst thing. And Trump is now says some executive order that he wants those, they call them ESAs, educational savings accounts. It's all the same thing. They used to call it backpack funding. In other words, you take your property tax that you pay for, for that goes to education, or just no, it's income tax that is the education. And I tell people this all the time. Uh, every time they lower, this is another thing. Every time they lower the income tax rate, and they're planning to do it again. Last year it was just a half a percentage, from 4.5 to 4 point or something like that. And then, oh, we passed a tax decrease. That is like $60 a month or something, or less than that for an average family. And if you make in the high six figures, you'd save thousand something. That comes right out of what used to just be public education.
Right.
But then they changed the Constitution a few years before, and they added higher ed and people and children with disabilities. So you've got all those public, higher disabilities, all coming from what was set up by Utah's the Constitution for public education. And then you take money for the vouchers. And yes, we're getting to a point where it's very difficult. You know that.
Yeah.
to
Do you think there's a kind of a movement within Utah, but maybe just broader conservatism to just weaken public education in general? And if so, why do you believe they would try to do that?
Okay, I call it the assault on public education. It's real, and it's getting more pervasive, and it comes from the rhetoric that comes right out of the 2025 project, and all those people like Miller and Vogt and those people around Trump. He
Stephen
is,
Miller, yeah.
yeah. Okay, this is what they say. The schools are sexualizing our kids. They're telling them how to think and what kind, I'm going to be part of a documentary. I did a Zoom meeting with these people out of LA last week. They're coming in a couple weeks, and they're doing a documentary on social emotional learning, because They listened to the testimony in our committee, and they heard me talk, and they liked what I said because I just blasted them.
Yeah.
And they say, you know, I've even heard Trump say, "Your kids go into school one gender and they come out another." They don't like social emotional learning. These are the MAGA Republicans. You know, they think that the Democrats are propagandizing and telling kids how to think and be liberal, and just like they're changing history, and they don't want to talk about racism or anything that makes us feel bad about our history. I mean, it is our history. I'm so concerned, Kason. This is one of my biggest concerns. If I were younger and we're going to run some more, is what's happening to public education. That's why I want Taylor Cater in there. That's why I reached out to Julie Jackson last year. She's got a public ed background. She's on the Granite School Board. She used to teach at Horizonte. There were 5 people right now. John Arthur is a current teacher. Doug Welton. He's a good Republican. He's, he votes with the Republicans, not all the time, but he's good. He's on the public ed committee with me. Tracy Miller, she's a school board. She's not a teacher, but she's done a good job. She's on the same side with me and others in public ed. And then in the House, the only people that are in education in the Senate is Kathleen Reeby. And then Darren Owens was a teacher. So, there were 6 of us. Now there'll be 5 without me. And Julie uses the number 66% of our budget goes to public ed, but I don't think she's right. I called Ben Leishman and he said, it's kind of how you look at it. If you add the federal money in and everything, but it's over a third. It's close to half of our budget goes to to the education fund. You know what I'm saying? And you only have a handful of people that really know education. I mean, everybody thinks they do because they were a teacher once. Right. I mean, they were a student
once, right?
And so, but you don't understand it. You understand the kind of things you're struggling with. I mean, I've had teachers contact me. That one just retired from Canyons District, lives in my area, said, taught 2nd grade for years, won awards and everything. And she said, Carol, I have 8 kids. This is last year. I have 8 kids in my class that have special needs, and they're so disruptive. I can hardly teach. The rest of the kids, get neglected because I'm always dealing with these kids that have really severe problems and act out. And it's not the kids' fault in most cases, but we don't have the special ed people and the kind of support.
Need more like paraeducators.
Yes.
And you're hoping that if there's more teachers that are in these positions in the legislature, that they're going to try to take care of those types of issues. They're going to
another thing,
make the profession better.
The big push for literacy, reading by 3rd grade, the governor and I went to his wife, invited me to her literacy luncheon, and I've heard all these speakers, and I know the whole thing about if you don't read by 3rd grade, you learn to read by 3rd grade, you read to learn after that. And if you don't, the stats show that kids drop out of school more frequently, so on. But instead of saying we'll hire a lot more teachers, and Taylor Cater pointed this out to me because he was at Driggs, who have the pedagogical skills, they say, oh, we'll hire hundreds. They put a lot of money into the budget to hire paraeducators. Well, that's nice. But, I could go there and listen. I mean, I'm retired to listen to kids read. I mean, someone said, well, volunteers are unpredictable. They don't have paras. But you know what? Why don't you put money into the teachers? More into the teachers. Yes, you can have some paraeducators, but the balance is really off. Why they want
you're saying hiring more teachers so that the class sizes are smaller is the
for 3rd grade up through Kathleen Reeby and I had a bill a few years ago to lower class sizes in grades 1 through 3 for that very purpose. So instead they were spending millions and millions, tens of millions to hire all these paras. And you know what? They can hire a lot more of them than teachers because they keep their hours down and they don't pay benefits.
Right.
They give them a 29-hour week.
Right. I've got to hop off, but
Hey,
last question for you, and I appreciate you meeting with me today and talking and doing this interview. Is it all right with you if I have parts of the interview that are posted like on the foundation or the History Education Foundation website and on social media and that?
yeah.
Okay. What
As long as I'm
what do
not
you,
looking foolish, or I
I,
don't
I
think
don't
I've
think I don't
said
think you do.
anything. I don't think I've said anything that I wouldn't want on there. I think
Okay.
I swore a couple times, but
That's
I
all
don't
right. I don't think you said any of the hard
the
swear
word
words. You just
the F
kind of
word.
said how, but I don't think if people are offended by how, I don't. We should be adults at that point.
No.
If just as right, your time in the legislature, what do you want your legacy to be remembered as?
Well, since my retirement's been announced, I've gotten quite a few awards. Granite District gave me an award. Getting one this week from the Unified Police Department Citizen of the Year award from a bill I did for our sheriff. But I've done a lot of different things, but mostly what people have written to me about and said, I'm so sorry leaving, is that teachers all over the state, not just here in my district, because sometimes people say, well, my district doesn't like this or my constituents don't. This one lady just said it over and over. The bills we pass, particularly education bills, but any bills, they don't just affect your district, they affect the whole state. So teachers have told me that live all over the state say, Carol, I'm so happy you're there because we know that we have a voice that represents us. And so I feel like that is would be my greatest legacy, that they always knew that they had somebody um, who understood. You have to have been in the classroom to really understand the challenges of teaching. And I think it's even greater today because you have, I don't know, I just hear that, a lot of kids don't read with social media. It's harder to get them to read and focus. I'm glad they're doing the cell phone bans. So that would be my greatest legacy. That and the naloxone bills and the Good Samaritan bills, I did like 6 of them all together, and those laws have saved people's lives. And Evan Doan, who's running for, the county council, and he's a good friend, recovering addict, and works with you, Sarah, and that's been his professional work. Um, and he said, "Carol, those bills have saved thousands of lives." So, I mean, you can't feel more proud of anything than saving people's
Yeah.
lives, because they've affected people close to me, drug addiction, people in my neighborhood, former students of mine have
Yeah.
died. Former students of mine have come up to me at that big rally for recovery every year and said, Mrs. Spackman, I was a drug addict and I almost died, and somebody saved my life with naloxone. And another guy came up and said, I want you to meet my mother. She saved my life because she got a naloxone kit and she saved my life. So those are the two things that I'm most proud of.
No, that's a great legacy to have. Well, perfect. Yeah, I appreciate you again meeting
Oh,
with me
it's my
today, and
pleasure.
it's always a pleasure to talk with you and hear from you. And you have a lot of good insight and a lot of good background information on this.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being a teacher and staying in the profession, and you can continue to make a big impact on people's lives, because I'm so proud of being an educator, and I could have made more money doing other things. I used to think I wanted to go to law school. There was a point where I almost did, and then my husband and I's marriage broke up, and I couldn't change careers then. But I'm so glad I didn't. I mean, I can't think of anything more rewarding than to have spent all those years with teenagers whom I love, but teaching people things that writing, and I'm sure you feel the same way, and insight into, like you do, government, and in my case, literature that affects the way life is and people's character. And I mean, I'm just so proud of it. And I've been fortunate to have that opportunity. I really have.
Absolutely. I feel the same as you. Well, thank you again. I hope that you have a great rest of your Sunday. We'd love to do this again with you in the future.
Okay. Well, I'm here. I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere.
Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Representative.
Thanks. You bet.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.